Well, last week we began a series on values, and particularly our values as a church. And we set up that talk by talking about corporate values. We talked about the idea that since the 1980s, it's been a really big deal for companies to say, this is either in our DNA and we want to remind future generations who come to work for us that this is important, or this maybe isn't in our DNA, but it's so important, we're going to put this down as a value because we're going to drive the people who work at our company to make sure that they put these attitudes into their practice because we want it to be really important. So that's kind of what values are. We talked about a few companies last week, Southwest Airlines, Zappos, IKEA. Let me give you a couple of corporate values today, and these will just be a few. Whole Foods. Some of you eat it or shop at Whole Foods up on Ponce de Leon's the closest one to us. This is what they wrote about their core values in their company documents. Our purpose is to nourish people and the planet. The following list of core values reflects what is truly important to us as an organization. These are not values that change from time to time, situation to situation, or person to person, but rather they are the underpinning of our company culture. And then they have a whole list of several values. I'm going to share a couple or three with you. One of their values is we sell the highest quality natural and organic food. That's a good one. Second one, we satisfy and delight our customers. And we don't shop at Whole Foods a lot, but I can tell you there have been times when we have bought some special cheese or we've had some special thing that we have found there that we have left feeling satisfied and delighted. A third value of theirs, we care about our communities and the environment. So that's Whole Foods, that's really good. I pulled up Disney's core values. Disney, one of the most recognized companies in the world. Here's a few of their core values. Leaders at Disney must be innovative and comfortable taking risk. I like that. They say leaders must provide overt, enthusiastic, and sustained support. They must be cheerleaders of employee development. So if you're kind of a drag, I'm thinking you're not going to be a leader at Disney. I'm thinking if you are, the world is always falling, the sky is falling, if you're that guy, you're probably not going to go to work at Disney. A third value of theirs, employee development, ranging from the front lines to the executive suite, must be entertaining, engaging, and memorable, not boring and forgettable. So it's real clear, right? You go to work at Disney, it is really clear what they want. They're not putting a dud in there. They're looking for somebody who is electrifying. That's the person they're looking for. Values can be very helpful things. Now, we introduced last week that at the Village, we have core values. And we introduced the first one, which is a big value, and then we broke it into two pieces. Here's how that value is worded. We believe that God loves all people, and every activity of our lives should reflect God's love for people. And then last week, we spent a great amount of time talking about what does it mean when we say God loves all people. And if you didn't see that, if you weren't here or it didn't stick in your brain like you wanted it to, look it up online. God is love. God is love. And we talked a lot about the first part of that value, that we believe with all our heart that God is love. If you're at the Village, that is going to be something you will hear more than probably any other church. I love this scripture from the Message paraphrase of the Bible about God's love. I want you to get this, Psalm 118, read it on the screen. Thank God because He's good, because His love never quits. Tell the world, Israel, His love never quits. And you, clan of Aaron, tell the world, His love never quits. And you who fear God, join in. His love never quits. Blessed are you who enter in God's name. From God's house we bless you. God is God. He has bathed us in light. Festoon the shrine with garlands. Hang colored banners above the altar. You're my God, and I thank you. Oh my God, I lift high your praise. Thank God He's so good. His love never quits. So that's the first part of our value. At the Village, we say it all the time. God is love. And we don't understand it. We're never going to be able to get our arms fully around it. But we believe it, and it gives us a grounding and peace that we have never experienced before. But now the second part of our value. Every activity of our life should reflect God's love to all people. Our story is not about being the biggest or the prettiest or the fanciest or the richest. Our story will forever be about a people who recognizes God as love and then see their mission to share that love with every person we encounter. That's the value of the Village. So today I want to talk about you and me demonstrating God's love both inside the walls of the Village and outside the walls of the Village. So you're still hanging with me? Everybody's hanging with me? Say amen real loud so I can make sure. Thank you for saying that. Let's first get into it. 3 foundational truths, okay? First one is this. We here at the Village don't make a distinction between inside the church and outside the church in the ways most churches do. Let me say it again. We don't make a distinction between inside the church and outside the church the way most churches do. Let me first say this traditional view. Inside the church, the people are good. Outside the church, the people are bad. Inside, the people of the church, their lives are together. Outside the church, their lives are not really together. Inside the church, those people are spiritual. Outside the walls of the church, those people not really spiritual. Inside the church, they're going to heaven. Outside the church, they're probably going to hell. That's the traditional way, at least the more conservative evangelical churches have understood inside and outside the walls of their church. But at the Village, we do not make that distinction. Here's what we have found. The potential for good or bad runs through every heart. Your heart and my heart. Inside the walls of the church, there are many people with their lives wonderfully together. But guess what? Outside the walls of this church, in no church at all this morning, there are many people who have their lives wonderfully together. Inside the walls of this church, there are also some people who don't have their lives together. And you know what? I'm so honored that you are here. And don't you feel bad about it? There were years I have sat in church services when the truth was my life was a mess. And so you don't feel bad if your life's not together. Inside there are people who aren't together, and outside the walls of the church, there are some people whose lives are not together. Inside the church, there are some people who are really spiritually tuned in. Maybe it's you. I hope it's you. I mean, you really just resonate with the Spirit in a way that's profound. But guess what? I have met some really spiritually in tune people who've never darkened the door of a church. Inside, I have known people who don't have any spiritual desire. They're just coming because it's a part of what they do. They don't really care. They're not really tuned in. And I have met people outside the church that don't have any real spiritual desire. Inside, I have met lives that seem to have a heavenly scent to it. You know what I mean? You just are in people's presence and you say, you know, there's something about them that is just precious. I don't know what it is, but there's something that just seems divine every time I'm with them. But I also have been around people outside the church who have that same kind of magic in their lives. And listen, I have met people inside the church whose lives are like hell. And they're inside the church, and it's a mess. And I have met people outside the church whose lives are like hell. So you get it? We don't make the distinction. There are good people in, there's good people out. It's all over. So you may say, Ray, what's the difference in people inside and outside the church? I want you to get this. Here's the difference. The difference between people inside and outside of the church is simply this: their proximity to you. Their proximity to you. Now, this leads me to the second foundational truth that I want you to get, which is this: Loving God is impossible apart from loving people. Loving God is impossible apart from loving people. People go to church for many reasons. I've done some informal surveys and I've asked the question, why do you attend the Village Church? I have heard things like this. I attend the Village because of the message of grace and hope that is taught. I like that. I've heard people say I attend the Village because of the sense of authenticity I feel during the times when we are all singing together. I like that. I've heard this one. I attend the Village because I want to learn to be a better man or a better woman. Or this one, I have heard, and I've heard it more than once, I attend the Village as a way to show I love God. I attend the Village as a way to show I love God. Let me ask you a question. How do we show God that we love God? How do we show God that we love God? Well, we can think about God, right? That's one thing we can do. We can sing to God, and maybe God likes that. I'm thinking if you sing like Rachel, God likes that. I don't know if you sing like some of us, if God likes it, but maybe that's a good thing. We can give support to things we feel would be important to God, right? And many of you do that, and I'm so glad that you do. But the primary way to know we are loving God is when we love people. That's where it's at. When you love people, that is the way you show you love God. To love God requires you love people. Here's a great Bible verse. You need to put this on your refrigerator and remember this. 1 John 4:20. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. That's pretty plain. You've got to love people. Which leads me to foundational truth number 3. Almost all of us say we want to encounter God. I hear that all the time. Ray, I just want to encounter God. Maybe we need to sing more. If we could just sing more, maybe that would help me encounter God. Or maybe there's a Bible study you can point me to. I want to encounter God. I believe all of us want to experience something that transcends the ordinary. We want to feel God's presence. We want to feel it. When I love people, here's the foundational truth. When I love people, that's when I encounter the presence of God. When I love people, that's when I encounter the presence of God. There's a story in Matthew 25. It is, to me, one of the most important utterances Jesus ever made. He is talking about the end of the world, and he's telling a parable, right? So don't read too much into the specifics of this, but he's talking about what's important. He said one day it's like there'll be this huge group of people lined up, and the king will separate them. The king will separate them into the sheep and the goats. And the sheep, he'll say, enter in. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in prison, you visited me. When I was sick, you nursed me. And the people will say, Lord, Lord, when did we do all of those things for you? And the Lord will say, when you did it unto the least of these, you were doing it unto me. In other words, I believe it is Jesus saying, I was mystically in the middle of you extending acts of love to people. I mystically was there. It's a beautiful thought to think that you can actually encounter God when you love people. So, are there practical applications? How do you do it? Well, you first love people you encounter every day in your life. Every day in your life, you're going to encounter people. Maybe it's your neighbor. Maybe it's someone you work with. Maybe it's a person from the gym. I've got some wonderful buddies that I just have gotten to know over the last few years working out of the gym. Maybe it's a grocery store clerk that you see all the time. Maybe it's an undocumented worker doing lawn work in your neighborhood. And let me just say a word. I did a wedding several years ago for a young couple. It was a Someone from Georgia was the wife, and the husband was from Mexico, but he had been here basically all of his life. He had come as a very little boy, and his family was an industrious family. They were very much a part of working. They were very believed in work very much. His name was Antonio. And I got a call last week from the wife, and they had been eating at Waffle House. I mean, I'm telling you, they are one of the cutest, sweetest, best families I've known. He's been here since he was a little bitty boy. They were eating at Waffle House, and somebody got in trouble at Waffle House, not associated with them at all, but the police came, and the police asked for everybody's ID, and his ID was it was a different kind of an ID, and ICE was called, and he is in jail waiting to be sent back to Mexico, where he has never lived in his entire life. He's never lived. And anyway, it's just, I hope that all of you know people who are here from other countries, and you are loving them, because their stories are very interesting stories, and they're not monsters, and they're not bad people, and they do not commit crimes in any way more than people who are naturally born here. They don't. So I just wanted to say that. But do you know people like that? Those are the kind of people that you want to be able to show love to: the neighbor, the work person, the person at the gym, the grocery store clerk, the undocumented alien that does yard work or works at a restaurant that you attend, or the transgendered girl working at the coffee shop. People that you encounter every day. Those are people you have an opportunity to show love to, and as you show love to those people, guess who's in the middle? God is in the middle of that. This is not up for debate. This is how we are supposed to live. We also not only are supposed to love people in our everyday lives, but for those people who are here at the Village, look around. Everybody, take just a moment, look around. Look at every person you can look at. It is our job to extend love to every person that's a part of this fellowship. So I want you to understand, you love everybody you come in contact with in the outside world beyond this building, absolutely. But because of proximity, you're coming in contact with a whole new group of people in this place, and it is your job and it is my job to show them love every single day. So how's that done, you may ask? Stay with me. Stay with me. Loving people here, and I was proud of this point, so I hope it makes sense to you, because it made sense to me. Loving people here starts with you showing up regularly. Now, that was hard for me to say, because I consider myself progressive. You know, I don't use guilt in any way to manipulate anybody here. You know that I don't hang anything over your head that somehow God is going to hit you in the head with a bat, or God's going to starve you and make you lose your job if you don't come to the church all the time and you don't support. We don't believe it. We don't believe it like that at all. But I want you to know, if I could wish for each of you something that I think could have real benefit, it is that some of you already come every opportunity you can. But some of you, and I love you, some of you, you come every couple of months. And I'm thrilled you're here. And don't let this get you mad and make you not come, because I want you to come. But I wish you could see the benefit in coming regularly. And part of that benefit is you get to know the people here so you can love them. I made a commitment to Jesus that I wanted to follow him in 1974. I was just a kid, but I wanted to follow Jesus, whatever that meant. I didn't know. And please understand, I have been all over the map on living a good and decent life, right? I have made so many jumps and ditch runs and all that kind of stuff. But I do know, 1974, I said, I really, as much as I can, I want to follow Jesus. Part of what I committed to was weekly worship with other people. That I was going to go to church and be with other people. I've always believed, and this might be naive, but I've always believed that God might just have a special message for me that I won't necessarily get if I'm not meeting in a church. Now again, I know that maybe sounds naive, but that's just the way that I've always thought. Now it hasn't always been easy. There were times when I was not pastoring, when I had gone through a divorce, when I did not want to go to church. I was eaten up with guilt, and I was eaten up with shame, and I was eaten up with depression, and the last thing I wanted to do was go into a church. And there wasn't a church like the Village. And so you've got to understand, I was going into churches that made me feel more guilty and more ashamed. But I got up and I went every Sunday. You know why? Not patting myself on the back, but the reason why is because I'd made a commitment to. I just thought maybe God had a message for me. God maybe was going to have a message for me, and I want to go so I can hear it. This is a true story. This happened a few years ago. A lady came up to me. Actually, I was in Hapeville. I was walking in Hapeville out of a little restaurant, and a lady who lives in Hapeville came up to me, and she had been attending our church and had been attending for the last year or two, but I hadn't seen her in a couple of months. I mean, she was regular, and then she was nowhere. And she came up to me, and she was so excited, and she said, "Ray, I believed exactly like you believe that if I didn't show up, I might miss a word God had for me." And she said, I don't know how I missed this, but did you know every sermon you preach is online?" And I said, yes, I kind of had a clue on that. And so she said this, and I promise she said this, "So now I don't have to deal with the people side of the church. That was the place I didn't like anyway. I can't wait for your message to come online so I can find out if God has a special word for me." What do you say? The people side of things didn't excite her. Now I want you to think about this with me just a moment. God might speak to you on a Sunday through the music. He speaks to me often through the music. God might speak to you through the words of the teacher. I sure hope so. But here's what she missed. God might speak to you through the interactions you have with the people in this place. That's probably going to be when the magic happens. That's probably going to be when something divine happens. That's probably going to be when your world gets rocked and your life gets changed. Remember Matthew 25? When you show love, God is there. God is there. The other side of the equation is this. Now, again, I was proud of this. Sometimes I come up with stuff and I think, that's good. That's really good. So I hope you like this. If I am not here, if I am Joe Village guy, and I decide I'm not going to go because the ball game is coming on, or I stayed up till midnight, or whatever. If I'm not here, there is a potential love deficit in the room. In the space I occupy, instead of love, there is a vacuum. Get your arms around that. Get your mind around that. We need your love here on Sundays. We need that. When you're not here, there are vacuums all over the place, and where love should be flowing, it's not. People come into this place, and whether they are healthy or whether they are hurting, whether they are filled with happiness or overwhelmed with despair, they are wanting to connect with God. They want to feel God's love. And you know how they're going to feel God's love? When you talk to them, when you get to know their name, when you find out some need that they have that you might be able to help, when you find out that you have something in common with them, when you can offer them a smile, when you can offer them hope. One of the ways that happens is when we connect with each other. And if you're not here, you miss a blessing, and I believe the person who is here misses a blessing, because maybe, just maybe, you were the one that needed to connect with them. So you ask me, "Ray, I am not sure I follow. I thought we were supposed to come to church for God and not for people," right? Does that seem like a straight question? We're supposed to come to God we're supposed to come to church for God, not for people. Well, Hebrews 10, chapter 25 says this: "Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." What is the writer of Hebrews saying? Some people have stopped going to church, but don't stop going to church, because you're needed to be there to encourage other people. Maybe we come because of God And maybe we come because there's a whole bunch of people that we need to encounter. Why is it important? So we might be an encouragement to people. That only happens when you show up. And by the way, please don't misread what I'm saying, that you never take a vacation. My gosh, I'm on vacation right now. So it's not that you never take a vacation. It's not that you never get sick and you have to be gone. It's just that your basic belief is that you're going to be in church every week. So how do we do it? Loving people here means we get to know the people. We get to know the people. Again, pause just a moment. Look around. Everybody, I know this is on video. Everybody look around at everybody in this room. Do you know their stories? Loving people here means getting to know the people and their stories. Loving the people here means you get to know who they are and you get to know their stories. We have some interesting people at our church. I think you have to be kind of sort of interesting to come to the Village. Do you know we have a chiropractor who is a part of our church, Elena? And Elena's wife is a part of our church. She's a doctor of physical therapy. So you have Elena and Heather. Elena, doctor of chiropractic. Heather, doctor of physical therapy. Doctor and doctor. It hit me when I was writing this sermon. They are truly a paradox. And I wish I could be there to see if anybody laughed or if y'all groaned, but I thought it was pretty funny. They are a paradox for true. So they sit right over there. So I hope that they're there and y'all can call them a paradox. At our house a few weeks ago, we had a lot of people from our LGBT community that were there who also attend the Village. And they didn't know each other really well, but it was the most wonderful thing as we were able just to get to know each other and just to see the chemistry. And it's like, I didn't realize y'all came to church and we're connected this way. And it was just this beautiful thing. And they all said the same thing. They loved being in a church family that wasn't a gay church. It was an everybody church where everybody's welcome. We have people here who have made choices that have led to their incarceration. They know what it's like to have lived time behind bars. And we don't judge them. Yeah, I want to hear their story. I want to hear what their life was like, what led them to that place. We have people here this morning that are going through broken relationships. Those people that you looked around and saw just a moment ago, I guarantee there's 3 or 4 people that are going through really relationship issues right now, and their world is rocked right now. We have a lady in our church, I just find this interesting. We have a lady in our church who was born and raised in Jamaica. And she is lovely, and we love her. We have people here who are from different parts of the country. And I love to find out, oh my gosh, you're from Arkansas, or you're from Delaware, or you're from California. We have a lady in our church who was raised in Canada. If there's ever a hockey question, I have to call her because I don't know anything about hockey, but she sure does. We have a lady in our church whose son was featured in a magazine as one of the most interesting graduates of Harvard University. Number one, that's a big deal to have one of your children graduate from Harvard University. Number two, he was called one of the most interesting students to graduate from Harvard University. He is an intellectual, and he is the editor of a very, very sophisticated magazine, and he also plays the banjo. I think that would probably qualify as being pretty interesting. We have a man in our church who is one of the most famous travel bloggers in the world. Can you believe that? We have a man in our church who founded a business that was so successful, it was an answer to a question on Jeopardy. Can you believe that? We have 2 couples in our church who were contestants on The Family Feud with Steve Harvey. And yes, I was a part of one of those couples, and no, it was not our finest hour, and no, we did not win. We have people in our church who have experienced business failures and business successes, and I find both of those stories really interesting because we learn as much about failure as we learn through success. We have people who have had wonderful successes and dramatic failures. That's all a beautiful thing. One of the beautiful things about life in a true spiritual community is you get to learn this phrase, you get to know and be known. Do you get that? In a beautiful spiritual community, part of the magic is you get to know, and in turn you get to be known. I love that. To me, that's one of the beautiful things of Jesus. You see him and the people that he was friends with. the tax collector trying to catch a view of Jesus from a lofty perch. And Jesus, knowing that he was a man despised, said, Zacchaeus, you come down. I want to have lunch with you. The woman at the well who had been married 5 times, Jesus sat patiently and talked to her. Tax collectors, adulterers, drunkards, people in the synagogue, people outside of the synagogue, he loved them. He interacted with them. He knew them, and they knew him. So you want to love people inside the church? Here's some thoughts. Get to know them. And by the way, I hope you'll take seriously what I'm saying. I wish some of y'all would just become so proactive on getting to know people and then letting me know about the people that you know in our church. Because sometimes people will tell me stuff and it's like, man, I didn't know that. But you have found out something interesting, something that's worthy of praise, something we should celebrate about somebody in our congregation. Learn their story, encourage them in their faith walk, empathize with them in their pain. This is real life, y'all. This is real life. It is in the nitty-gritty that it happens, and it happens here, even on Sundays here. It's the unedited real lives men and women live every day, and it's here, and you get to know a little bit about it. Men in our church who, for whatever reason, don't live in a house or an apartment, but they live in the woods, or they live under a bridge, and for whatever reason, that's kind of where they are. But you know what? They get up and they come to this place and they don't feel looked down upon because they're not people to be looked down upon. They are people to be loved. God loves all people, and we in turn get to love all people. So how do we do it? We don't judge people. We listen to learn. We see if there are ways that we can help. We let them know we love them and we are on their side. I love that about the village. To me, one of the beautiful pictures of the village is we believe always in a bigger table. We just want to keep building a bigger table and say to everybody we encounter, you are welcome to sit at the table. You are welcome to sit at the table. Come sit at our table. We want to get to know you. You come. You're important. You're somebody that we want to be a part of our family. All right. You've listened. You've done well. I want to close with one more company's core values. And then I'm hoping going to tie this together and we'll pray and you'll be dismissed. The company I want to look at just for a moment is the company Nike. Now, I felt some of you flinch, so hang with me, please. Before I make my point, I guess I need to address just a little bit of the controversy. You know the story. Colin Kaepernick, who was a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers a couple of years ago, first sat on the bench during the playing of the national anthem. But then a friend who also had played in the NFL, Nate Boyer is his name, he was a former Green Beret. Nate Boyer suggested, you're doing this as a protest, and you're doing this as a protest because African Americans are being shot disproportionately unarmed by the police. And if you want to make this protest really heard, don't sit on the bench, kneel. And when you kneel, it's going to be more respectful. It's going to be received more respectful. So everybody knew that's what it was. Colin Kaepernick began to kneel through the national anthem, and he was kneeling for what reason? Because African Americans were being shot, and then there was by police, and then there was never any kind of repercussions. Police were being set free. They never, ever, ever were punished for what was taking place, and it was disproportionate to what was happening to any other ethnic group. And in the court systems, it was disproportionate what was happening to African Americans. And so, in a real way, Colin Kaepernick, just like Martin Luther King Jr., just like all the people who have seen racial inequality and have fought for it, said, I'm going to try to make my feelings felt, which is during the national anthem, I will take a knee as a sense of our country is great, but our country is not taking care of this problem. Right? So that's what it was. And a lot of NFL players joined in. And then for some reason, one side began to scream and holler that they were somehow disrespecting the flag and they were disrespecting the men and women who had fought in the military. Even though they said repeatedly, We are not in any way trying to disrespect the flag, and we are in no way trying to disrespect men and women who fought in the military. We are just saying there is a total disproportionate number of African Americans being killed by law enforcement, and there's never any punishment, and then our people are being tried and convicted and sentenced to much longer sentences than white people, and there's just something wrong, and we want to draw attention to that, so we're doing it for that reason. Okay, you get the point. And just so you remember, what made everybody riled up a couple of weeks ago is Nike used a commercial with Colin Kaepernick in the commercial, and this caption that said, "Believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything." So that was Nike. I want you to know I stand by Nike making Colin Kaepernick a spokesperson for them, and I have never found any protest African Americans have ever attempted that have ever been liked by people who have a racist mentality, whether it's sitting in at Woolworth's lunch counters or whether it's a peaceful walk across the Pettus Bridge. I have found in my lifetime, every time there is any attempt at protest, there is pushback and people saying that that's not the right way to do it. Well, what's the right way to do it? I felt like it was a peaceful thing. I understood it. It never to me was anything but what Colin Kaepernick said it was. But he has been effectively banned from the NFL. No team will sign him. But I think as history goes, people will look back on Colin Kaepernick and they will think of him as someone who took a stand, and that's a great thing. I said all of that, which has nothing to do with my sermon. I just was going to use Nike as a close, and I needed to get that out of the way. Okay, let's get back to Nike. So Nike has core values. Here's a few of them. It is our nature to innovate. So that's a good one. Here's another one. Nike is a company and Nike is a brand. So they're always thinking Nike is a company and Nike is a brand. That's why it wasn't a difficult decision for them, by the way, to endorse Kaepernick, because as a brand, they understand younger people get it. Younger people are understanding it. We just have to make sure that we are not listening to the people who want to always cause divisive rhetoric to take place, and we take someone's protest and say it's respectful. It actually is why people fought and died around the world, so we can have the freedoms to protest if we feel like something's not right. Nike says this is one of their values. We are on the offense always. I like that. Here's the main one, though, that I want to close with. Their last value is this: remember the man. And the man they're talking about is Bill Bowerman, who with Phil Knight is one of the co-founders of Nike. Let me give you a little bit about Bill Bowerman, because until I was planning this talk, I had never, ever heard of him. Bill Bowerman was born in 1911 in Portland, Oregon. He excelled as a student athlete while attending the University of Oregon, and he later gained acclaim as a high school football and track coach. He fought in World War II, and he came back a decorated war hero, and in 1948, Bowerman returned to his college alma mater, University of Oregon, and during his 24-year tenure, led the university to 4 NCAA track titles, and he coached 16 runners who ran sub-4-minute miles. So he was a big deal. In 1958, Phil Knight, that's the other co-founder of Nike, in 1958, Phil Knight, a business major at the University of Oregon and a minor on the track team, shared with his coach, Coach Bowerman, a dissatisfaction with the clumsiness of American running shoes. They put their heads together, and those two men, Phil Knight and Bowerman, formed Nike. And so one of Nike's values is remember the man. When you don't know what to do, you remember Coach Bill Bowerman, the coach at University of Oregon, the one who's our great leader. You remember how he did it. If you have a question, you don't know what the right way to approach it is, everything we do, we're going to remember Bowerman because Bowerman did it right. I love that. Let me close for you, Village family. Our values have that same feel. Every activity in our lives is to reflect God's love. And when you wake up on some days, and maybe it'll just be days where you're just a little out of sorts, and for whatever reason, you don't know what to do, I want you to know you too can remember the man. When I say remember the man, I'm talking about the man Jesus, who showed how to love every day he lived. You look at how he engaged people who were social outcasts. You see how he engaged people who were thought to be sinful and disgusting by the religious crowd. You see how he talked to people who were the intellectuals and the elites, and how he talked to the people who were the lowly and the uninformed. You see how he dealt with people who were from other nationalities or who were people who were discriminated against. You see what he did. And then you learn how to put that into practice in your life. You remember the man, and you'll get a pretty good heads up on what it means to live our first value, which is love God, and in every activity of your life, you treat people the way God would treat people. You guys have been great. Would you bow your heads with me, please? God, we thank you for today. We thank you for every person who was here. We thank you for this talk, the idea that our value is that God is love, and it is our job inside and outside of the church to love every person we encounter, no exceptions. God, let us become the place where people say, no one loves like they love. Let us become the place that's known not by the beauty of our building or the size of our congregation, as much as let us be known as the people who practice real love every single day. Thank you for this day, and thank you for every precious person who is at the Village this morning. We love you, and we pray this in Christ's name. And everybody said, amen. Get to know somebody before you leave. Bye.
There's nothing you can do, can't be done.